In just 72 hours, a Bronx congresswoman turned a presidential threat into a political wildfire that scorched every corner of America. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez didn't yell. She didn't blink. She spoke 5 words that made the White House quake and split the nation in two. When the most powerful man alive calls you a national threat, do you fight back and risk everything, or let history bury your name in silence? The marble walls seemed to hold their breath as the cameras clicked like distant lightning. The White House briefing room wasn't full, but it felt suffocating. The air hung heavy thick with the kind of tension that made even seasoned reporters sit a little straighter. Phones buzzed in pockets, thumbs hovered above screens. Outside, protesters' chants bled faintly through the thick glass. Inside, the lights were too bright, too hot, and every lens pointed toward the podium. Then he walked in, Donald Trump. His steps were slower than usual, deliberate, almost like he knew the weight of every eye on him. His red tie swayed slightly as he gripped the edges of the lectern, knuckles white. There was no smile, no preamble, just a rustle of papers as he shuffled them. The microphones crackled. Bennett Gorski, one of his closest advisors, moved fast, almost too fast from the side of the room, a slip of paper in his hand. Red bold letters screamed across the top, DOJ leak, urgent. He placed it on the podium discreetly, but everyone saw. Everyone. Trump's eyes flicked down for a fraction of a second. His jaw tightened. Without a word, he crumpled the paper in his hand and let it fall behind the podium. Cameras didn't miss that either. Neither did the reporters, who suddenly shifted in their seats. Something was off. Trump leaned forward, gripping the lectern harder. His voice, when it came, was sharper than usual. "There is a sickness in this country," he said. "And I'm not talking about a virus. I'm talking about a mindset, a radical agenda infecting the hearts of our people." He paused. The room went still, pens frozen midair. Even the air conditioning seemed to hush. One congresswoman has taken it upon herself to openly defy executive orders, to spread lies, to incite rebellion. She's not the opposition. She's the infection. The words hung like smoke. Cameras zoomed in lenses, clicking in rapid succession. A reporter in the second row blinked hard, his hand tightening around his notepad. He knew what was coming. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Trump's voice slowed, savoring each syllable like it was a blade being sharpened. "Warney should be investigated for sedition. A beat. Frankly, she should be jailed." The room inhaled all at once. Then silence. Complete suffocating silence. No coughs, no whispers, just the high-pitched whine of a microphone too close to its speaker. Reporters exchanged glances, half shock, half calculation. Fingers flew across keyboards, some still stunned into stillness. A woman in the third row muttered under her breath, "Did he just..." but didn't finish. Trump scanned the room, his gaze icy and unflinching. A cameraman swallowed audibly as his lens zoomed in on Trump's face, catching a faint twitch in the corner of his mouth. No one dared interrupt. Finally, a lone voice stammered from the second row, hesitant and trembling. "Mr. President, are you saying you'll instruct the DOJ to..." Trump cut him off, slicing the air with a sharp gesture. "We're looking into it," he said. "People like her, they think they can tear this country apart with their words. They think there are no consequences." "Well, there are." Behind him, Gorski shifted uncomfortably, his hand brushing the corner of his jacket, where his phone vibrated nonstop. He didn't check it. He didn't dare. Trump's words were already being clipped, shared, blasted across every social platform within seconds. Outside the briefing room, a staffer's phone lit up with a push notification. "Trump threatens AOC with jail time." Inside, the walls seemed closer now, the marble columns oppressive, looming like silent witnesses to something bigger than a press conference. Cameras blinked their red eyes under the heat of the lights. Fingers hovered over record buttons, knowing this footage would not just trend, it would explode. A chill spread through the room, an unspoken awareness that this was no ordinary day, no ordinary speech. Somewhere in the back, a young intern whispered to no one in particular, "This changes everything." And it did. The president straightened his tie, his expression hard. No further comments. No room for questions. Just a glance to his right. Secret Service stepped forward, signaling the end. Reporters surged with shouted questions, their voices crashing over each other, but Trump was already walking out. The crumpled paper DOJ leak, urgent, still lay on the floor behind the podium. Forgotten by him, but not by the cameras, not by the room. Outside, the chants of protesters grew louder. Not organized, not in unison, but a phrase rose above the rest, carried by hundreds of throats into the crisp air. Let her speak. Let her speak. And somewhere in a modest office in the Bronx, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was already watching. Eyes sharp, hands steady. She didn't blink. She didn't speak. Not yet, but she would. And when she did, the world wouldn't be ready. The screen still glowed in the dim office as the words echoed like a drumbeat in the back of everyone's minds. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez should be jailed. Outside the window, the Bronx skyline felt unusually still, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Inside, 6 people sat scattered around a long wooden table, laptops, open phones buzzing with notifications stacking like falling bricks. Someone coughed nervously. AOC didn't move. She stood behind her chair, arms crossed her blazer, catching faint reflections from the TV screen. The clip rewound automatically, the familiar red banner flashing across the bottom. Breaking news. A young aide barely out of grad school spoke first, his voice tight. They're spamming hashtag traitor AOC already. It's trending. Top 3 on Twitter. His fingers danced nervously on his keyboard. Another staffer, older, shook her head. Fox is running wall-to-wall coverage. It's on every hour. No one looked directly at her. They all looked at the woman standing silently by the screen. Then her voice cut through the tension, low but steady. Play it again. The aide hesitated. Alex, you sure you've already played it? She repeated. Her tone didn't rise. It didn't have to. The aide reached for the mouse. The clip rolled back. The image jumped. Trump's face appeared again on the screen, jaw set like stone, his voice sharp as a blade. She's not the opposition. She's the infection. The words clung to the walls of the Bronx office, just as they had in the White House briefing room. Cameras flashed in the background of the clip, capturing the moment that had already begun its viral crawl across every platform. AOC watched it all. No blinking, no sighs. Her eyes burnt not with rage, but with something quieter, heavier. Resolve. The ringing of her phone startled the room. It wasn't a press call or a politician checking in. The screen flashed, Mommy, she answered without moving from her spot. Mija, are you safe? Her mother's voice trembled slightly, the sound of pots clinking faintly in the background. AOC's fingers tightened around the phone. Her voice, when it came, was almost gentle. I'm safe, but democracy isn't. For a second, the only sound was the muted hum of traffic outside. The aide nearest her rubbed his temples, muttering under his breath. They're already framing you as radical divisive. The bots are out in force, hundreds of tweets a minute. Another chimed in, her voice barely above a whisper. There's talk of DOJ inquiries, Alex. This isn't bluster anymore. AOC turned slowly to face them, her expression unreadable. The glow from the screen lit her face in sharp contrasts, calm eyes, set jaw, the faintest flicker of something deeper in her stare. She placed the phone down without ending the call. They want noise, they want fear. We won't give them either. One staffer stood pacing now. We should draft a statement, condemn the rhetoric, call it authoritarian, get out ahead of this. He waved his arms as he spoke, his voice gaining speed. We hit back now before the narrative sets. But AOC raised a hand, palm open. He stopped mid-sentence. No, she said simply. We don't hit back. We don't amplify him. Not yet. The room fell quiet again, all eyes turning back to the glowing screen. The clip had replayed itself, looping like a warning siren. Trump's voice filled the room once more. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez should be jailed. AOC didn't flinch. She tilted her head slightly, studying his face on the screen, as if memorizing every crease, every micro-expression. Her fingers drummed lightly on the table's edge. Another aide broke the silence, his tone cautious. Alex, what's the play here? If we don't respond, we will respond, she interrupted. Her voice was calm but carried an undertone of steel, but not how they expect. She moved toward the table, picking up a yellow highlighter from a scattered pile of office supplies. The small gesture caught everyone off guard. She held it in her hand for a moment, rolling it between her fingers. Tomorrow morning, no press filter, just me. Let them hear it straight. Facebook, live YouTube. Both the aide asked tentatively. AOC looked up. All of it, everywhere. She sat down, finally exhaling a long, controlled breath. The glow of her phone caught her iMessages piling in missed calls, stacking like a tower ready to collapse. One name flashed repeatedly. Owen Jeffries, a fellow congressman. She ignored it for now. We don't fight fire with fire, she murmured more to herself than the room. We fight it with sunlight. Patrice, her communications director, stepped forward, concern etched into every line of her face. You know this isn't just politics anymore, right? This is bigger. Once you go live, you can't pull it back. No edits, no second takes. AOC's eyes finally softened, but only slightly. Good. Let them see me exactly as I am. The looped video ended once more, the room briefly silent except for the faint whir of a laptop fan. Outside, sirens wailed distantly, echoing off Bronx brick. Patrice took a cautious step closer. They're going to hit you harder than ever, Alex. Smear campaigns, death threats, the works. AOC turned to her, the corners of her mouth almost but not quite curving. They already are. Someone's phone buzzed violently on the table, a push notification flashing in bold, breaking DOJ sources, consider action against AOC. The headline froze them all for a second. AOC's gaze lingered on it before she leaned back in her chair, highlighter still in hand. She clicked it open, reading silently. No panic, no reaction. Finally, she looked around the table, meeting each pair of anxious eyes. Tomorrow, she repeated, we speak, and we don't stop until they do. The aides exchanged uneasy glances, but no one argued. Outside, the night had settled heavy over the city streetlights, flickering to life one by one. Inside, the looped video began again. Trump's voice, almost taunting, now filled the space. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez should be jailed. This time, no one flinched. The words still echoed in the Bronx office like a ticking clock in a silent room. Outside, the streets were slick with rain headlights cutting thin lines across wet asphalt. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stood near the window, her reflection merging with the city lights beyond. Below, posters clung stubbornly to brick walls and lampposts, edges curling under the weight of the downpour. Protect our vote, they declared in bold, defiant letters, now streaked and bleeding as raindrops worked them loose. Inside, her team whispered among themselves, their voices a low hum of tension phones, vibrating across the table in an unending chorus of alerts. Somewhere across town, sirens wailed, though no one seemed to notice anymore. Patrice checked her phone again, eyes scanning headlines. They're escalating, she said finally, her tone clipped. Fox is running panels on DOJ action. Twitter's a dumpster fire. And now there's a leaked DOJ already drafting internal memos. They're moving fast. AOC's gaze didn't waver from the window. She pressed one hand lightly against the cold glass, her fingers splayed, as if to reach the world outside. So are we, she murmured, but so softly no one responded. Her breath fogged the pain, and she wrote an invisible line with her fingertip, pausing halfway, as the glow of a nearby streetlight flickered. The rain didn't let up. A bus rumbled past its sides, plastered with an ad for a local grocery store. But there, tucked in the corner, another poster. This one hand-painted flash by democracy is fragile. Handle with care. At the same moment inside the West Wing, the atmosphere was anything but fragile. The Oval Office lights burned too bright, casting harsh shadows on the walls. Donald Trump sat at the resolute desk, fingers drumming the surface as a half-dozen advisors hovered in a loose semicircle. The tension was thick enough to choke. Bennett Gorski stood closest, a manila folder clutched tight against his chest. He spoke first, his voice steady, but eyes darting nervously between the president and the others. Sir, the DOJ is drafting compliance measures as requested. They're preparing enforcement protocols should you give the final word. Trump leaned back in his chair, his face unreadable for a beat, then his lips pressed into a thin line. They think this is a game. She thinks she's untouchable because she's got a webcam and a few angry protesters. He slapped his palm flat against the leather blotter, the sound making one aide flinch. Prepare enforcement. Quietly. I want her rattled before she even opens her mouth. Yes, Mr. President, Bennett replied, though his fingers tightened on the folder until the edges crumpled. A younger aide piped up cautiously. Should we consider public optics? Trump cut him off with a glare. Optics. You think optics matter when sedition is on the table? The aide nodded silently, shrinking back, as the president turned to stare at the TV mounted in the corner. Footage of AOC walking through her Bronx district played on loop, her blazer damp with drizzle, as she spoke to constituents under shared umbrellas. Trump's jaw clenched. Find her weakness. Everyone has one. Dig. Back in New York, AOC still hadn't moved from her post at the window. Behind her, Patrice crossed her arms, her voice lowering. Alex, if they're drafting enforcement orders, you know what that means, right? This isn't just talk. It's pressure. Legal, political, maybe personal. The younger aide, the same one who'd stammered earlier, whispered, they're going to try and scare you into silence. AOC's hand slipped from the glass, falling back to her side. She turned slowly, her expression, calm, eyes sharp. Then they'll be disappointed. She picked up the highlighter she'd left on the table earlier, flipping it between her fingers. The movement was absent-minded but deliberate. Patrice sighed, her voice softening. You've got half the country watching and the other half sharpening their knives. Just be ready. The room grew still again as rain pelted harder against the windows. In the background, the looped video of Trump's declaration played once more on a muted screen. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez should be jailed. The words scrolled silently across the caption bar, their weight no less heavy for their lack of sound. AOC broke the stillness, placing the highlighter on the table with a soft click. She met each set of anxious eyes in the room, her voice low but steady. They think fear will work, that if they scream loud enough will fold. But I've seen louder. I've seen worse. She turned back to the window, watching as the rain slicked over the faded posters. The words "protect our vote" clung stubbornly, even as the ink ran in long black tears. Her reflection stared back at her, merging with the city lights. Tomorrow, she said finally. We don't let them set the stage. We do it ourselves. The aides exchanged glances, none daring to speak. Outside, the storm-swelled wind rattling the glass. A car horn blared in the distance, then fell silent. Trump's voice echoed faintly from the muted television again. She's not the opposition. She's the infection. AOC's fingers traced the edge of the window frame, pausing as if holding on to something unseen. Her lips parted, the words barely above a whisper. If truth needs someone to listen. She began, her gaze fixed on the wet streets below, where a lone figure hurried past, clutching a raincoat tight against the wind. I'll give it a chance. The highlighter rolled slowly off the table's edge, hitting the floor with a soft thud as the screen behind her blinked with yet another breaking headline. The highlighter was still warm in her hand as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez leaned forward, her elbows resting lightly on the worn edge of her desk. Behind her, a single window let in muted Bronx daylight, its frame chipped the glass, smudged with faint streaks of rain. No studio lights, no makeup. Just her, a navy blouse pressed sharp against her shoulders, hair pulled back tight. 9:08 a.m. A single camera lens stared back at her from the other side of the desk, its tiny red light blinking like a steady heartbeat. For a moment, she only looked into it, her breath controlled, her posture still. Then her finger tapped the screen. We're live, a staffer whispered from behind the camera. Good morning, AOC began, her voice calm, but edged with the unmistakable clarity of someone speaking not to a crowd, but to a single unseen listener. I want to speak directly to those of you who've been watching the news wondering why the President of the United States called for my arrest yesterday. She paused just long enough to let the words settle, her eyes not blinking. On the screen, the viewer count ticked upward. 1, 172, 2, 406, 4, 980. She picked up the thick, printed document lying in front of her, the executive order signed 3 days prior. Its clean pages bristled with sticky notes and ink marks. Slowly, she flipped to the middle section, her fingers deliberate, and held the page up toward the camera. Yellow highlighter lines ran across several paragraphs like bright caution tape. This, she said, tapping the paper with the highlighter, is the clause that started it. Her tone didn't rise, it didn't need to. This clause allows federal authorities to suspend or relocate polling locations in districts identified as at risk for civic disruption or misinformation. Her highlighter followed each word carefully, tracing over them so viewers could read for themselves. "Do you see what I see?" she asked quietly, leaning a little closer. "Because here's what this means in plain English. If someone tweets a fake video of a fight outside a polling station in a predominantly Black or Latino neighborhood, they now have the power to shut that polling station down. Entire neighborhoods, entire communities, silenced because of a rumor." The chat window on the live stream exploded. Messages scrolled so fast they blurred together. "What is this real? She's lying. No way. Show the page again." The viewer count passed 20,000 toners. AOC lifted the document higher, angling it for better visibility. Page 34, Section B, Subclause 3. "It's all here, and it's legal, because no one thought you'd read this." She tapped the highlighter against the margin twice for emphasis. By 9:13 a.m., there were over 250,000 people watching. In the corner of the screen, push notifications began piling up as news outlets clipped the stream live. CNN breaking AOC responds directly to Trump's threat. MSNBC AOC unfiltered. Fox News AOC live stream dangerous. A staffer leaned in just out of frame, whispering nervously, "We're at 500,000 already. Comments are flooding. Bots too." But AOC didn't look away from the lens. "If reading a law aloud makes me dangerous, then maybe the law fears the people more than it fears me." Her fingers gripped the edge of the desk. The viewer count ticked again, 1.3 million. Somewhere in Middle America, a grocery store manager paused mid-aisle as his phone buzzed. In a cafe in Seattle, customers gathered around a propped-up tablet, streaming the video mugs of coffee forgotten on chip counters. At a bus stop in Atlanta, a college student leaned forward, earbuds in her thumb, hovering above the share button. AOC turned to a new page. This next section authorizes federal agents to monitor polling locations in high-risk areas. Do you know what they mean by high risk? Because I do. It's code for places like the Bronx, places like Detroit, places like South Phoenix, places where people who look like me are the ones lining up to vote. At 9:17 a.m., the count crossed 2.8 million. The chat window was now a torrent, some messages frantic, others furious, others cheering. "They can't do this. Where's the media? I didn't vote last time. I will now." Patrice's voice came low and tight from behind the camera. "Alex, we're about to hit 5 million viewers." AOC barely nodded. "Good," she said under her breath. She clicked her mouse and shared her screen, revealing 2 leaked DOJ emails. The first was brief, almost clinical, ensure compliance with executive objectives in election oversight. The second carried her name highlighted in bold, monitor Ocasio-Cortez's public channels. "Rising threat to administrative unity." The chat exploded again. "What the she's got receipts." "Is this legal?" AOC's voice stayed calm. "These are internal memos from the Department of Justice. Someone thought I should see them, and now I'm making sure you do too." She leaned forward slightly, her hands folded now, her expression unflinching. "The president said I should be jailed, but I'm not the danger here. The danger is pretending this is normal." By 9:20 a.m., the viewer count crossed 5.2 million. Across America, televisions were being switched off, and phones switched on as word spread faster than anyone in the Bronx office could track. Patrice glanced at her watch, her throat dry. "We've got cable networks broadcasting clips already. They're scrambling." AOC's lips curved almost imperceptibly. Not a smile, something sharper. "You're not supposed to see this," she said, holding the executive order up one last time. "But now you have. The question is, what will you do with it?" The screen blinked as comments poured in like a digital roar, and outside her office the rain began to slow. It wasn't quiet, though. Not anymore. The viewer count ticked past 5.2 million and still climbed like a runaway train. On screens across America, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez remained steady, her voice calm but deliberate, each word landing like a hammer on glass. But beneath the surface of her stream, another war had already begun. At first it was subtle, a few comments sprinkled into the live chat, repetitive and robotic. "Traitor, lock her up. She hates America." Then they multiplied. In seconds, the chat was overwhelmed with an endless stream of identical phrases, caps locked and angry. The bots had arrived. Patrice leaned in from behind the camera, whispering with a tight jaw. Bot farm. Probably coordinated. They're drowning the feed with traitor AOC. Her fingers danced across her phone, refreshing analytics, watching hashtags spike like a sudden fever. It's trending. Third worldwide in under 2 minutes. AOC didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed locked on the camera, her hand resting lightly on the stack of documents before her. If you can flood a comment section, you can't flood the truth, she said softly, almost to herself. But outside her office, in kitchens and classrooms, on trains and in hospital break rooms, real people were watching and reacting. In Chicago, a high school teacher propped her phone on a desk as students leaned in close. One senior muttered, "They're calling her a traitor for what? Reading the law." On Reddit, screenshots of the live stream were being stitched together with captions, "Bot swarm attacking. Time to push back." Twitter users began rallying in threads, their fingers flying. Then it happened. Someone posted simply, hashtag stand with AOC. Flood it back. And like a spark in dry grass, it caught. On Instagram, a community organizer in Atlanta posted a story, "Don't let bots drown her out." Comment. Share. Hashtag stand with AOC. Within seconds, the tag began climbing. On TikTok, teenagers began posting split screens of AOC speaking while typing, "We stand with her." "Do you?" across their captions. The momentum surged. In the live stream chat, a new wave rolled in. "We're here. We're louder." Hashtag stand with AOC. Real voices began to outnumber the bots, each comment pushing the algorithm harder. Patrice's eyes widened as she watched the dashboard. "It's flipping," she whispered. Hashtag stand with AOC just passed their tag. Trending #1 globally. AOC finally broke her gaze from the document to glance briefly at the exploding chat feed. Her lips tightened, not quite a smile, more a recognition. She spoke again, voice clear, unwavering. "If reading the law makes me a threat," she said, fingers tapping the highlighted clause before her, "then maybe the law fears the people more than it fears me." In Los Angeles, a barista paused mid-order to turn up the volume on her phone. In a small town in Ohio, a retired veteran tweeted, "This is what I fought for, her right to speak." A single mother in Phoenix posted a selfie with her children captioned, "They won't silence her or us." Hashtag stand with AOC. By 9:28 a.m., the viewer count hit 7.1 million. Every major news outlet now had their cameras pointed at her livestream, broadcasting it raw. Even Fox News couldn't resist their lower third Chiron reading, AOC unhinged or uncovering truth. Patrice whispered again, her voice tight with disbelief. "Alex, you just broke the all-time livestream record. Worldwide. Every platform." But AOC stayed focused, her thumb idly rolling the edge of her highlighter as she spoke. "They will say I'm reckless. They will call me divisive. But here's what they won't say, that they read this document themselves." She tapped the page. "They won't say they highlighted the parts that matter because they don't want you to." The comments kept pouring in like waves against a dam. "We're here. We're louder." Hashtag stand with OC. Somewhere in the chaos of trending tags and breaking news alerts, a single thought seemed to take hold in millions of minds at once. This isn't just about her anymore. In Washington, inside the West Wing, Bennett Gorski stared at his phone in horror as live analytics flashed red and climbing. He turned to a colleague whispering, "This isn't just viral, it's out of control." Down the hall, Trump slammed a fist against the resolute desk, his voice carrying, "Cut her feed. Do it, whatever it takes." But they were already too late, and in the Bronx office, AOC adjusted the stack of documents in front of her, the camera catching a faint glint in her eye as her voice came steady and sharp once more. "This is not a moment for silence," she said. "This is a moment for clarity." The screen crackled as her words echoed across millions of devices. And somewhere in the flood of comments, one line stood out, repeated over and over by real hands, real voices. "We're not bots. We're the people." The numbers kept climbing like an unstoppable tide. 5.9 million. 6.0. The Bronx office was silent except for the hum of laptops and the soft sound of rain against the windows. On screens worldwide, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez leaned forward slightly, her hands resting on a stack of marked-up documents, her voice steady as the storm outside. But 200 miles away in the White House Situation Room, the atmosphere was anything but calm. Cut her feed. Trump barked, his face flushed a vein visible near his temple. Cut it now. I don't care how. The room froze. Bennett Gorski, pale but trying to mask it, cleared his throat. Sir, with respect, we can't directly find someone who can. Trump slammed his palm on the table. This isn't just a live stream anymore. This is an insurrection in pixels. A young advisor, eyes wide, stammered out. We've already reached out to DOJ contacts, sir. They're contacting YouTube citing potential safety violations, incitement concerns. It's their best shot at forcing a temporary takedown. Trump waved a hand in the air like swatting a fly. Do it. Push it through. If her numbers hit 6 million, we've lost the narrative. In the Bronx, Patrice's phone vibrated violently on the table. A red notification banner flashed, live stream flagged potential safety issue. Viewers surge warning. Her stomach dropped. Alex, she said quietly, stepping closer. They're trying to shut us down. If we cross 6 million, YouTube's algorithm might auto-trigger a suspension. AOC didn't flinch. She adjusted her posture slightly, her eyes still locked on the camera. What are we at, she asked. 5.98, whispered the aide monitoring analytics. Then 5.99. 6.0. In the live chat, panic sparked among viewers. Don't stop. They're trying to cut it. Stay live. Please, God, stay live. Hundreds of comments per second flew up the screen, real voices pushing back against invisible hands on levers of power. Back in Washington, a DOJ liaison on speakerphone muttered tersely, "We've sent the request. YouTube's reviewing." Trump leaned forward, hands gripping the edge of the table. "Tell them to act now. Not in 5 minutes, not in 2. Now!" At 6.1 million, Patrice's laptop chimed a system warning. "Alex, they sent a takedown alert. It's hanging in review." AOC's hands didn't move. Her breathing stayed even. The camera caught the faint reflection of the numbers climbing behind her in the office monitor. 6.2 million. 6.25. She glanced briefly at Patrice, her expression calm as glass. "Let them watch." Then she turned back to the lens, her voice lower but sharper, cutting through the noise like a blade. "I know some of you are afraid this will end, that they'll silence us mid-sentence. I need you to hear me clearly." Her hand rested lightly on the papers in front of her. "I'm not stopping. Not until every word in this document is as clear to you as it was to me." In the Situation Room, a notification appeared on the big screen. Live stream active. Review status delayed. Bennett swallowed hard. "Sir." "It's stuck in algorithmic review. Could take minutes. Maybe longer." Trump's fist slammed the desk. "This is incompetence. 6 million people seeing her call me a criminal." 6 million? His voice rose sharp enough to make even seasoned advisors flinch. "If we lose this now, we lose control." 6.3 million. On the live stream chat, comments poured in faster than ever. "Don't cut, don't cut, we're staying." Hashtag stand with AOC. Entire communities had begun echoing each other's words, a human algorithm fighting back in real time. AOC's voice stayed calm, unwavering. "If they cut this feed, remember it's not because of what I've done. It's because of what I've shown you." She flipped to another page of the executive order, her highlighter tracing over a section as she read aloud. The sound of her voice alone carried enough weight to still the Bronx room. This clause allows federal monitors to enter polling sites and suspend operations at their discretion. No oversight, no appeals. Just silence where there should be ballots. In Montana, a rancher set down his coffee cup and muttered, "Hell no." In Detroit, a group of nurses watching on break shouted in unison at their phones, "Don't you dare cut her off." Even on Wall Street trading floors, brokers glanced nervously at muted TV screens streaming her feed. 6.35 million. Trump turned to his press secretary, his voice now a hiss. "Draft a statement. Say she's spreading disinformation. Say she's endangering national security." "Leak it if you have to," Patrice whispered from behind the camera. "Alec, the warning's still active. If it tips, we could be gone in seconds." AOC blinked once, slow and deliberate, then let every second count. The chat roared as if hearing her through the screen. "We're not leaving. We stay with you. 6.4 million, 6.45, 6.5. In the DOJ server logs, an automated flag stalled in the queue. A single line of code failed to execute. YouTube's internal system flagged the case as high profile and required manual human approval. It never came, and so the stream stayed alive. Patrice exhaled sharply, clutching her phone to her chest. The aide monitoring analytics whispered in disbelief. They missed it. "We're still up." Trump's face turned crimson as a new headline flashed across the Situation Room screen. AOC live stream breaks global record. Over 6.5 million watching. The president's knuckles whitened as he gripped the table. "Then hit her harder," he growled. But back in the Bronx, AOC didn't seem to notice. She tapped her highlighter against the desk, her eyes locked on the camera, like she was staring down the entire world. The viewer count hit 6.6 million, then 6.7, and she spoke, calm, precise, unbroken. "I will not stop." The Bronx office was still humming from the weight of the live stream when Patrice's phone buzzed with a new notification. It wasn't social media this time. It was an encrypted message forwarded from a trusted journalist. The subject line read, "DOJ Internal. Confidential." Patrice tapped it open with careful fingers, her eyes scanning rapidly. A single line stood out in stark black text against the white screen. "Maintain enforcement of executive agenda. Monitor AOC's public channels." Her breath caught. "Alex," she said, her voice lower than a whisper. "You need to see this." AOC looked up from her seat, highlighter still in hand, her face calm but sharp. She reached for the phone and read the line twice before setting it down on the table with deliberate care. Across the country in Seattle, a barista named Lacey propped her phone on the espresso machine, earbuds dangling loosely. The screen glowed with AOC's frozen frame. The live stream paused mid-gesture. The cafe was quiet, save for the hiss of steaming milk. She pressed play. AOC's voice carried over the whir of grinders and clinking cups, clear and unyielding. Customers, one by one, turned from their laptops and conversations. A man in a suit stopped scrolling his phone. A mother rocking a stroller glanced up. Even a delivery driver paused by the door, helmet in hand. "This is not about election security," AOC's voice said through the small speaker. "This is about controlling who gets to vote and where." The words seemed to hang in the cafe's warm air. Lacey wiped her hands on her apron and turned up the volume. The hiss of steam faded. Silence settled. The customers didn't move. Back in Washington, the DOJ's internal servers were not silent. Screens glowed in dim offices as agents scrolled through flagged internal emails. One thread subject, Ocasio-Cortez monitoring protocol. Another buried deeper, request for accelerated enforcement readiness in key districts. Someone had leaked it, and now it was out. At the same moment, Bennett Gorski sat hunched in the West Wing's communications room, staring at his phone. The message had hit his inbox, too forwarded by an anonymous source. His fingers hovered over his keyboard. He didn't type. He didn't speak. He just stared as the screen refreshed, bringing with it a torrent of breaking news headlines. In the Bronx, AOC's phone buzzed again. Patrice answered it quickly, her voice tight. "Yes, she saw. Yes, she's aware." She glanced at AOC, who was now standing, staring out at the gray sky. Rain streaked the office window, distorting the city lights below. "We can't run from this," AOC said softly. She turned her gaze, cutting across the room. "And we won't." In the Seattle cafe, the video continued. AOC's voice, firm, measured, filled the space. "If this administration is willing to rewrite the rules quietly, imagine what they'll do when no one's watching." A young man near the counter muttered, "They're watching her. Literally." His friend frowned. "Wait, they're actually monitoring her?" Lacey nodded without looking up. "It's in the leaks. DOJ's on her." The mother with the stroller whispered almost to herself, "This feels wrong." Meanwhile, in Washington, the DOJ's press office phones rang incessantly. Reporters demanded statements, clarity, anything. But no one picked up. An aide in a cramped office stared at a blinking cursor in a draft email. "We neither confirm nor deny," but deleted it before hitting send. Patrice's laptop dinged with a fresh alert, trending hashtag Doge leaks, hashtag stand with AOC, hashtag surveillance state. The words flashed in bold against her screen. Viewer comments from the earlier live stream were being stitched into TikToks, shared across Instagram stories, reposted on Twitter by celebrities, professors, and even retired judges. The narrative had slipped. It wasn't just about a live stream anymore. It was about surveillance. In the Bronx, AOC returned to her seat, pulling her chair closer to the desk. She placed her hands flat on the wood, the highlighter still between her fingers. "So now we know," she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. "They're watching. They've been watching." The aides exchanged glances, uneasy but silent. "Good," AOC added, "then let them see everything." At 9:42 a.m., the cafe in Seattle remained unusually quiet. A customer, an older man in a denim jacket, spoke first. "You know, I thought I'd seen everything in my lifetime. Guess I was wrong." Lacey gave a small nod, eyes never leaving the screen. Outside, rain drizzled against the glass, soft and relentless. In Washington, Trump was pacing. His phone buzzed with updates. He didn't want to see DOJ monitoring emails leaked. Calls for investigation mount. Ocasio-Cortez livestream breaks 7M viewers. He stopped mid-stride, gripping the back of a chair so tightly his knuckles whitened. "Find the leak," he growled. "Find it now." But it was too late. The leak had already seeped into living rooms, classrooms, offices, and coffee shops like Lacey's. And across those places, a quiet question began forming in people's minds. Not shouted, not hashtagged, but whispered like a secret, too dangerous to say out loud. What happens when the watchers are caught watching Hoy ChatGPT? The DOJ leak was still rippling across screens when the next shock hit. It wasn't AOC this time. It was Senator Maxine Rell. Known as a moderate, often cautious with her words, Rell stepped up to a podium outside her Phoenix office just as twilight settled over Arizona. No script, no teleprompter, just a cluster of reporters and her signature gray blazer catching the dying sunlight. She gripped the edges of the podium with steady hands, her voice clear, carrying across the courtyard. "The First Amendment does not come with an asterisk," she said. The cameras clicked in rapid fire, catching her calm expression as she continued. "You cannot silence dissent because it is inconvenient. You cannot jail opposition because it is loud. I may not agree with every word Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez has said, but I will defend her right to say it." For a moment, the courtyard was still. A passing car slowed to a crawl as someone rolled down their window to listen. Then came the questions shouted from all directions. "Senator Rell, aren't you worried about political fallout? Do you think this is treasonous behavior from the administration?" She raised a hand, slightly silencing them. "This isn't about parties or power plays. This is about the Constitution. And I swore an oath to it, not to any man." By midnight, her remarks were trending. Hashtag Rell Speaks shot to #1, stitched into TikToks and Instagram reels. Clips of her, standing alone against a sea of microphones, played in loops. But so did another clip, this one darker. Police vehicles lined her quiet suburban street hours later, lights flashing silently as uniformed officers moved with tense precision. A caption on one viral video read, "This is democracy under siege." Inside her home, Senator Rell stood in her kitchen, her phone buzzing on the counter. The screen showed a single sentence from an anonymous number, "You made your choice. Watch your back." She set the phone down slowly, her fingers brushing the marble countertop. Her husband entered the room, worry etched deep into his face. "Maxine, is it serious?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she glanced out the window at the patrol car idling at the end of their driveway, its headlights slicing through the darkness. "It was always going to get serious," she said finally. Back in the Bronx, AOC's team watched the unfolding news coverage in tense silence. The grainy cell phone footage of police standing guard outside Rell's home played on the office monitor. "She took the hit," Patrice whispered. "She didn't have to, but she did." AOC's eyes stayed fixed on the screen, her expression unreadable. "Courage has a cost," she said quietly. Meanwhile, the White House wasn't still. Trump stormed through the West Wing, his voice audible even behind closed doors. "She's gone rogue," he fumed to advisors. "She'll bring others with her if we don't shut this down now." Bennett Gorski stood at the edge of the room clutching a notepad. Sir, we're drafting a statement attacking her credibility, painting this as political theater. Trump's jaw clenched. Make it stick. But outside of Washington, the response wasn't so easily controlled. In coffee shops, dorm rooms, and living rooms, people replayed Rel's simple declaration over and over. The First Amendment does not come with an asterisk. Her words became a rallying cry, handwritten on cardboard signs, repeated in tweets and text chains. In Dallas, a college sophomore posted a clip of Rel's speech alongside footage of her campus protest captioned, "This is what democracy sounds like." In Montana, a retired teacher wrote on Facebook, "I never thought I'd see the day a senator needs armed guards for speaking her mind. I'm sharing this because silence helps no one." But not everyone was supportive. On a conservative radio show in Alabama, a host ranted, "She's a traitor to her party. She's emboldening radicals. She deserves what's coming." The soundbite went viral too, sparking heated debate across platforms. As dawn crept over Phoenix, 2 more patrol cars arrived outside Rel's home. Her husband watched from behind the curtains, his hand tightening on the fabric. "How long do we keep this up?" he asked. Rel didn't turn to face him. "As long as it takes," she replied. Back in the Bronx, AOC finally broke the silence in her office. "They're not just watching me anymore," she said, her voice steady. "They're watching all of us." Her gaze drifted to the rain-slicked streets below where posters still clung to lampposts. "And we have to decide who blinks first." The night air across America felt heavier than usual, as if even the wind was waiting. In cities, suburbs, and small towns alike, people gathered under dim skies with candles in hand. It began in silence. A single mother in Minneapolis lit a candle on her porch and whispered to her son, "This is for your future." In Charleston, a retired Marine unfolded a pocket constitution, reading it aloud as neighbors stood in a loose circle around him. Children clutched tea lights with both hands, their small faces glowing in the soft flicker. Everywhere the light spread slow, at first then faster. On social media, photos of the vigils began to cascade, parks filled with rows of candles, courthouses surrounded by quiet crowds, apartment balconies dotted with flickering flames. In Philadelphia, an elderly woman recited the preamble, in a voice cracked with age but steady with conviction. A college student nearby recorded her posting it with the caption, "We remember. We won't stop." In the Bronx, AOC sat in her dimly lit office scrolling through the flood of images on her phone. Patrice leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, eyes damp. "They're everywhere, Alex. Seattle, Birmingham, even Boise." AOC's fingers paused over her screen as she typed, her thumbs moving deliberately. She hit send without hesitation. Her tweet went live at 8:46 p.m. "They attack because they fear the light. So let's light more candles." The words were short, simple, but they caught fire instantly. Within minutes, #LightMoreCandles trended worldwide. A video surfaced from Kansas City, a little girl holding a wax candle nearly as tall as her forearm, whispering, "For Miss AOC. For us." It spread across platforms like a spark on dry grass. In Tallahassee, a group of high school students marched in silence around the old State House, their candles forming a wavering ring of light. One held a handmade sign, "Truth doesn't burn." A local journalist's drone footage caught the moment, the circle of candles glowing against the night. The clip went viral before the students had even finished their march. Meanwhile, in Washington, Bennett Gorski watched the footage on his office screen with a sinking feeling in his chest. Trump's voice thundered from down the hall, words muffled but sharp. "They're making her a martyr. They're turning her into their Joan of Arc." Gorski rubbed his temple and muttered to himself, "It's not just her anymore." Back on the streets, the mood wasn't one of anger, but of quiet determination. A man in Des Moines stood outside a grocery store with a candle balanced on a paper plate. When asked why, he simply said, "Because my grandmother wasn't allowed to vote, and I won't let it happen again." At 9:15 p.m., live streams of the vigils began trending. In one, a family of 4 in Portland sat cross-legged on their front lawn, candles flickering between them as the father read the Bill of Rights aloud. In another, a group in Atlanta knelt outside a courthouse humming "This Little Light of Mine" as their candles glowed like fireflies in the dark. Patrice's phone buzzed with yet another notification. New York Times, candlelight vigils, signal growing movement. She looked over at AOC, who was still scrolling, her face unreadable. "You started something bigger than us," Patrice said quietly. AOC didn't look up. "No," she said. "They did. Across the country, police scanners reported peaceful gatherings growing in number. In Sacramento, a drone camera caught an overhead view of thousands standing shoulder to shoulder, candles raised high like defiant stars against the night sky. Someone overlaid text on the video, "This is democracy under siege," and yet it stands. Even in places not known for protest, rural Wyoming, small-town Alabama candles burned in windows on porches in church parking lots. A pastor live-streamed his congregation holding candles inside the sanctuary saying, "We are not here for politics, we are here for light." By 10:00 p.m., AOC's tweet had been shared over 3 million times. Celebrities reposted it. Civil rights groups adopted it as a rallying cry. In a small Brooklyn diner, a waitress set a candle on every table, whispering to a coworker, "They can't snuff us all out." In the White House, an advisor spoke cautiously. "Sir, this isn't just a PR crisis anymore. It's an uprising of optics. Candles don't riot. You can't call it unlawful." Trump slammed his fist against the Resolute desk. "Then call it weak. Call it performative. I don't care. Just make it stop." But even as he raged, screens around the West Wing continued to glow with images of flickering candles, glowing faces, and handwritten signs. And in Seattle, Lacey, the barista, stood behind her espresso machine, phone propped up. The live stream showed children passing flames to elders' hands steady, even as wax dripped onto their skin. A customer waiting for his latte whispered, "Looks like the whole country's awake." Lacey nodded without breaking her gaze, maybe for the first time. By midnight, as the Bronx office lights dimmed, AOC closed her phone and let out a long breath. In the soft glow of her desk lamp, her highlighter lay still on the stack of documents. Outside, the city streets shimmered faintly, not from traffic or neon signs, but from candles placed on windowsills, steps, and sidewalks, each one burning against the darkness. The Senate chamber was unusually still, the kind of heavy silence that settles before a storm. Rows of polished desks gleamed under the overhead lights as senators whispered in pairs, their murmurs bouncing off the marble walls. At the center, Senator Maxine Rell stood alone at the podium, her gray blazer sharp against the dark wood. Her voice was calm but carried weight as she introduced the resolution. "This is not a partisan issue," she said. "This is about the preservation of democratic norms. I move to freeze implementation of Executive Order 1187 pending congressional review." Pens froze mid-scratch. Staffers leaned forward in their chairs. Somewhere in the upper gallery, a protester's sign bobbed silently, "Let us vote." On the other side of the country in the Bronx, AOC sat in her office watching the live feed. Her arms were crossed, her expression unreadable as Rell continued. "We cannot in good conscience allow an unchecked executive to silence entire communities under the guise of security." The camera caught her pausing deliberately before she added, "We can debate policy, but we do not debate the Constitution." But in the West Wing, the mood was anything but calm. Trump stood behind the Resolute desk, fists clenched at his sides, jaw tight enough to ache. The television on the wall replayed Rell's speech in a loop. "She's standing there like she's leading a revolution," he snarled. Bennett Gorski stood a few feet back, his notepad clutched tightly to his chest. "Mr. President, it's possible the resolution won't pass. Party lines are holding, for now." Trump spun on his heel, pointing a finger at Bennett, his voice low and sharp. "For now isn't good enough. Rell doesn't fear me. You make her fear me." Bennett hesitated, his mouth dry. "Sir, with respect, escalation could." The sound of Trump's hand slamming against the desk cut him off. Papers fluttered to the floor. "She doesn't fear me. Then we'll remind her what happens when you cross me." In the Senate, Rell finished her remarks to a subdued room. As she stepped away from the podium, aides swarmed, whispering updates into the ears of their respective senators. The whip count shifted minute by minute. Some senators stared stoically ahead, others fiddled nervously with their phones. The tally was tightening. 48 for 49 against 3, undecided. Patrice's voice cracked through the Bronx office like static. "Alex, if this stalls, they'll push enforcement nationwide within days." AOC didn't respond immediately. Her eyes stayed locked on the screen as she traced the rim of her coffee cup with her fingertip. Finally, she spoke. "They're counting votes, but the real count's already out there." Patrice frowned. What do you mean? AOC turned her gaze toward the window where candle stubs still dotted the streets below. Look outside. It's not just us watching anymore. In Phoenix, Rel's phone buzzed with a text from an anonymous number. Leave it. Last warning. She didn't flinch as she read it, even as a security detail whispered in her ear about increased threats. Outside her office, armed police shifted positions under floodlights. Someone recorded their footage later paired with a caption that would go viral within hours. This is democracy under siege. Back in the West Wing, Trump paced like a caged animal. Leak something on Rel. Old donations, voting records, anything. Break her down before she flips more of them. An aide nervously suggested, what about a statement condemning protest activity painted as unrest? Trump stopped his glare enough to freeze the room. No, this isn't unrest. This is war. Meanwhile, the Senate's roll call began. Names echoed through the chamber, each one carrying the weight of millions of eyes watching. Outside Capitol Hill, crowds pressed against barriers, holding candles and handmade signs. One banner fluttered in the cold wind, "Count us too." AOC's phone buzzed with a message from a local organizer. We're holding in every major city. They're not backing down. She typed back only 2 words. Neither are we. Inside the chamber, Rel watched from her seat, hands folded tightly in her lap. She murmured almost to herself, the First Amendment doesn't have an asterisk. A young aide standing behind her glanced down nervously but said nothing. Trump's voice echoed through the West Wing as the Senate vote neared its end. This was never about the order he spat. This was about teaching them to kneel. So kneel they will. But outside, no one was kneeling. Candles kept burning their flames unbroken, even as a chill wind swept across the gathering crowds. And in the Bronx, AOC whispered softly into the room, more to herself than anyone else. They think this ends with a vote, but votes are just numbers. It's the people who decide if they matter. The lights in the State Line Weekly studio were softer than usual, deliberately dimmed to avoid the harsh glare that so often swallowed politicians whole. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat across from veteran anchor Jonah Frank. Her posture straight, her hands folded lightly in her lap. No makeup team, no handlers off camera, just her and the questions waiting to strike. Jonah's first words came like a surgeon's incision. Congresswoman, the president called you a national threat. The DOJ leaked emails mentioning you by name. The Senate is split down the middle. Why are you still speaking? AOC's eyes didn't waver. Because silence protects power, not people, she said evenly. The room held its breath. Behind the cameras, a producer signaled that over 14 million people were already watching live a record. They hadn't even hit the first commercial break. This isn't about me, AOC continued, her voice steady but edged with the kind of quiet fire that carries farther than shouting ever could. This is about communities who've been silenced not by guns but by paperwork, by polling places that vanish overnight, by ballots that never reach mailboxes, by laws written in language so clean it hides the dirt under it. In living rooms across America, people leaned closer to their screens. In a diner in Boise, customers stopped eating to listen. At a bar in Atlanta, the crowd fell silent as the broadcast played on every screen. A young bartender whispered, "She's not even yelling." A regular shook his head. "She doesn't have to." Jonah didn't blink. "But critics say your actions are reckless, even dangerous. They accuse you of stoking division." AOC's response came without pause. If reading an executive order aloud is dangerous, then the danger isn't in my words. It's in what they're trying to hide. At 9:17 p.m., the viewership counter ticked past 30 million. On Twitter, clips of her comments began circulating before she'd even finished the segment. "Not about me, about us," became a trending phrase within minutes. Jonah leaned back slightly, his tone sharpening. "What do you want? An apology from the White House?" A retraction? AOC shook her head slowly. "I want something much harder. Accountability, transparency. And for every voter in every zip code to know they're not pawns on someone else's chessboard." In Phoenix, Senator Rel watched from her kitchen table, the glow of the TV flickering across her tired face. Her husband set down his coffee. "She's pushing them harder than anyone thought she would." Rel didn't look away. "Because she's not playing their game." By 9:41 p.m., the broadcast had passed 50 million viewers. Phone notifications across the nation vibrated with headlines, "AOC confronts executive power" on live TV. 71 million views in 24 hours. Stateline weekly breaks historic record. As Jonah wrapped up, he posed one final question. Congresswoman, aren't you afraid this could cost you everything? Your seat, your career, even your safety? AOC leaned forward slightly, her gaze locked on the camera. I'm not afraid of losing power. I'm afraid of losing the people's trust. If I'm removed for speaking truth, let it be known I went out doing the job I swore to do. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was electric. In the Bronx office, Patrice sat frozen, her hand over her mouth as her phone buzzed nonstop. Alex, you're everywhere. Every network, every feed. Even Fox can't stop looping it. In Washington, Trump's face turned red as advisors replayed the clip in his office. He pointed at the screen like it was a live threat. She's not afraid of me. Then let's see if she's afraid of losing everything else. Outside, in small towns and big cities alike, candles flickered again on porches and sidewalks as neighbors passed the words back and forth. She's still speaking. So will we. It began not with a press conference or a headline, but with a PDF uploaded quietly to the DOJ's website at 11:37 p.m. Eastern. No fanfare, no podium. Just 6 paragraphs buried between updates about cybercrime indictments and staffing changes. But someone noticed. A Tulane law professor posted the link on X with 3 words. This changes everything. Within minutes, screenshots of the second paragraph were everywhere. Acknowledge procedural lapses in the internal handling of communications and confirm a formal inquiry into administrative pressures surrounding Executive Order 1187 and Representative Ocasio-Cortez. In the Bronx, Patrice's phone buzzed violently as alerts stacked one after another. She handed it to AOC with a shaking hand. They blinked. AOC stared at the screen, her expression unreadable. She set the phone down and whispered, "They blinked." Across the country, reaction spread like fire on dry grass. In a Brooklyn diner, a waitress read the update aloud to her coworkers. "Did you hear DOJ's opening an inquiry?" A cook leaned against the counter, exhaling sharply. "Took them long enough." A regular at the corner table added quietly, "We saw, we heard, we believe." The phrase echoed simple but defiant. On social media, the words morphed into a rallying cry. We saw, we heard, we believe. Posts paired with photos of vigils, screenshots of AOC's live stream, and images of grandmothers clutching faded voter ID cards. In Portland, a group of students chalked the words in huge letters across their campus quad. In Birmingham, an elderly man recited them into a camera phone, his voice trembling but strong. Inside the White House, the mood was anything but celebratory. Trump's face darkened as the news flashed across his phone. A procedural lapse, he growled. "That's their excuse," Bennett Gorski tried to calm him. "Sir, they're calling it an inquiry, not an indictment. It's not a full reversal." Trump's fist slammed against the desk, rattling a crystal paperweight. "It doesn't matter. To them, it's weakness." Meanwhile, cable networks scrambled to cover the development. CNN ran a split screen of AOC's interview and the DOJ's quiet acknowledgement. MSNBC's Chiron read DOJ admits errors, launches review. Even Fox aired a muted segment, their hosts speaking in clipped, careful tones. In Dallas, a retired schoolteacher posted a video of herself holding a candle. "We saw the truth. We heard her words. We believe her." The clip was shared over 2 million times within hours. At 8:04 a.m., AOC went live again, not from a studio, but from her desk, hair pulled back, no makeup, a simple green blouse. Her voice was steady, almost gentle. "This isn't vindication. This is proof. Proof that sunlight works, that silence doesn't." She held up the same highlighted document she had shown days earlier. "These pages didn't change, but enough of you saw, enough of you heard, and now the cracks are showing. In coffee shops, classrooms, and break rooms, people paused to watch." Comments flooded her feed, many repeating the same words: "We saw, we heard, we believe." And in the DOJ's press office, aides read those words, scrolling endlessly across their monitors, realizing what the White House hadn't yet admitted out loud. The fight was no longer just in D.C., it was everywhere. It started like static, low-level blogs and fringe podcasts whispering claims about radical funding. Within hours, it spread to prime time. Headlines blared: AOC, backed by extremist donors and foreign interests, fuel her fire. On cable panels, pundits spoke with faux concern, their words dripping with implication. In the Bronx, a new billboard went up overnight near the Cross Bronx Expressway. The letters were crude and unmissable. AOC, nar, vo chung. Patrice pulled her car over when she saw it snapping a photo with her phone. Back in the office, she dropped her bag on the table and showed AOC the image. They're hitting hard. AOC studied the photo for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then she let out a short, humorless laugh. They're loud because they're losing. Outside, the rain began to fall harder, streaking the glass and blurring the neon glow of the city. But inside, the team didn't flinch. Screens continued to buzz with notifications, hashtags shifting like tides. Patrice sat down exhaling. It's not stopping anytime soon. AOC's fingers drummed lightly on the table. Then neither are we. And as the smear machine roared louder, so too did the quiet resolve of those who had seen, heard, and believed. In a high school civics classroom in Des Moines, a teacher wheeled in a projector cart and pulled up AOC's live stream. The students watched in silence as she read from the executive order, her voice filling the room like a steady drumbeat. One boy raised his hand, eyes wide. She's just reading the law. The teacher nodded, her expression firm. Sometimes that's all it takes, miles away in a swing. State-county quiet acts of defiance were blooming overnight. Hand-painted banners appeared on overpasses and courthouse fences, let her speak. Farmers zip-tied signs to their wooden gates. Shop owners taped them inside dusty windows. A truck driver from Ohio posted a video of himself hanging a banner across his rig. I don't care what side you're on, he said into the camera. If they can shut her up, they can shut any of us up. In the Bronx office, Patrice scrolled through a thread of images showing the banners spreading across battleground states. She tilted her phone toward AOC. They're making their own network. AOC glanced at the screen, her lips pressing into the faintest of smiles. Good. That's how change survives, one whisper at a time. Outside, rain streaked the windows as the city's lights blurred into smears of gold and red. And far beyond those whispers were turning into a low-rising chorus. The Bronx office was quiet when Patrice's laptop chimed with a new message. She glanced at the screen, her brows arching slightly. It's from Rel, she said, voice barely above a whisper. AOC looked up from her notes, her pen still in hand. What does it say? Patrice read aloud. Are you willing to draft a bipartisan framework for election reform? We may not get another window. AOC leaned back in her chair, the highlighter rolling slowly between her fingers. She stared at the ceiling for a moment, as if weighing every possible outcome. Then she exhaled sharply and looked Patrice in the eye. If not now, then when across swing states the letter-speak banners still clung to courthouse fences and overpasses rain-soaked but unyielding. In Phoenix, Rel sat at her dining table typing a follow-up, time is thin. We draft quietly. Are you in? She hit, sent her hands trembling slightly as she stared at the empty coffee cup beside her. AOC's phone buzzed seconds later. She read the screen, jaw tightening. She's serious, she said quietly. Patrice hesitated. So are you, Alex. You've always been. Outside, the city pulsed with headlights and flickering candle remnants, as if waiting for her next move. Behind the heavy oak doors of the Dirksen Senate office building, 4 lawmakers sat around a long table, littered with legal pads, laptops, and empty coffee cups. The air smelled faintly of marker ink and exhaustion. On the far wall, a whiteboard was crammed with hastily scribbled clauses, arrows looping back on themselves, and equations like a complex math problem. Words like transparency, redistricting oversight, and national voting standards stood out in bold strokes. AOC stood near the board marker, uncapped, her blazer sleeves rolled to her elbows. We're not here to tweak margins, she said, her voice even, but charged with a quiet intensity. We're here to reset the board. Senator Rel nodded from her seat, tapping her pen against a thick binder of drafts. The others exchanged glances. 2 parties, 1 room, united not by ideology, but by urgency. Outside the window, the faint glow of Washington's street lamps cut through the winter fog. The Capitol dome loomed in the distance like a silent witness. Inside, the scratching of pens resumed as the group dove back into language that could outlast administrations. This wasn't politics anymore. It was architecture. The cafeteria smelled faintly of crayons and peanut butter as AOC knelt among a circle of 3rd graders, their eyes wide with curiosity. Paper name tags clung to their shirts, handwritten in uneven letters. One girl with braids raised her small hand hesitantly. "Miss AOC," she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, "if they don't want us to vote, is it because we're too small?" The room seemed to pause. Even the teachers standing nearby fell silent, waiting for the answer. AOC reached out and gently took the girl's hand in hers, the contrast between their sizes striking. Her gaze softened, but held its steady flame. "No," she said, her voice warm but firm. "It's because they're too afraid." The girl blinked, then gave a small nod as if storing the answer somewhere deep. Around them, tiny hands clutched pocket-sized copies of the Constitution. AOC had brought their pages still crisp. A boy whispered to his friend, "I'm going to read mine to my grandma tonight." Outside the windows, the faint sound of distant traffic hummed, but inside the only thing audible was the quiet resolve settling into young hearts. In a small church basement in Milwaukee, folding chairs circled a table scattered with sample ballots and voter registration forms. A retired librarian walked the group through each step, her voice calm but deliberate. "No question is too small," she said. "Ask." Down the block, at a corner cafe, baristas wore bright stickers on their aprons. "Ask me about my ballot." Customers whispered questions between sips of coffee, passing pamphlets hand to hand. At a high school gym in Georgia, parents and teens gathered around laptops during a weekend workshop. A young father leaned over to help an older neighbor navigate the state's registration site. "We got you," he said with a reassuring nod. In the Bronx, AOC watched photos of these gatherings flood her phone screen. Church halls, coffee shops, classrooms, all filled with quiet determination. "It's spreading," Patrice murmured from the doorway. AOC didn't look up. "Good," she said softly. "That's how we win when it doesn't feel like winning." On shop windows and backpacks, the stickers multiplied. "Ask me about my ballot." Not flashy, not loud, but everywhere. And in that steady rise, a new kind of momentum took root. The chamber was tense as the clerk read out the final tally, 51 yeas, 49 nays. A ripple ran through the Senate floor, not cheers, not gasps, just a collective exhale. Outside the Capitol, thousands stood shoulder to shoulder in the cold candles cupped in their hands as the news spread through the crowd. Then almost instinctively, a woman began reading aloud, her voice trembling, but growing stronger with each word, "We the people." Others joined in, their voices overlapping into a chorus. By the time they reached the second line of the preamble, the sound was rolling like distant thunder. A little boy on his father's shoulders whispered the words under his breath, clutching a pocket Constitution. Camera crews scrambled to capture the moment as it swelled, not a riot, not a rally, but something quieter, more permanent. Inside, AOC stood at a window overlooking the sea of candles and voices. Patrice came up behind her, whispering, "They're still reading." AOC nodded slightly, her reflection barely visible in the glass. "Because they finally know it's theirs." Outside, the voices rose again in unison, and for a split second it was hard to tell if the marble pillars themselves were humming. The elementary school auditorium smelled faintly of floor wax and old paper, just as AOC remembered. Rows of students sat cross-legged on the polished wood floor, their paper name tags fluttering slightly in the warm air. She stood on the low stage, no microphones, no cameras, just her voice carrying across the room. "I'm not famous," she said, her tone soft but unwavering. "I just refuse to let lies live in peace." In the front row, a girl with bright pink barrettes raised her hand shyly. "Does that mean we can say the truth too?" AOC smiled, crouching slightly so they were eye to eye. "It means you must, even when it's hard." The girl nodded slowly, her fingers gripping a tiny pocket Constitution. As she stood to leave, teachers clapped gently, and one whispered, "They'll remember this." Outside, parents waiting by the gates murmured as they watched her walk past, a few pulling out phones to snap photos they'd never post online. Above, the Bronx sky was streaked with early evening gold, and somewhere a train rumbled over iron tracks, carrying questions and quiet resolve through the city. The office lights hummed softly as AOC leaned back in her chair, a chipped mug of cold tea forgotten at her elbow. Patrice stood by the window, scrolling through an endless stream of headlines and hashtags on her phone. "They're calling it a win," she said carefully. AOC shook her head, her eyes fixed on the scuffed floor. "This isn't a win, it's maintenance. until the ground stopped shifting under us. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of someone who understood that victories in politics were never permanent, only borrowed. Outside, the Bronx streets pulsed with life. Posters from the last march still clung to lampposts, edges frayed, words fading. Yet in shop windows and on cafe doors, new signs had appeared. Ask me about my ballot. They weren't flashy, they weren't loud, but they were everywhere. Patrice set her phone down and looked at AOC. So what now? For a moment, AOC didn't answer. Then she straightened her gaze, sharpening with familiar fire. We get ready, because this isn't the last push. It never is. Long after the office went dark, the words lingered like a quiet promise she hadn't just fought back. She was building a map for those still on their way. What if courage isn't about standing on a stage but holding your ground when no one's clapping? AOC's fight wasn't just against a policy, it was against silence. And in that silence, millions found their voices. Maybe the real question isn't whether history will remember her, but whether we'll remember our own power to speak, to act, to protect what matters. If tomorrow the ground shifted beneath your feet, would you stand firm or wait for someone else to draw the map? If this story touched you, don't let it stop here. Like, share, and subscribe to Alexandria Rising Stories, where every voice matters and every story echoes far beyond the screen. This story is a fictionalized and dramatized narrative created for educational, inspirational, and storytelling purposes. While it may be inspired by real public events, people, or societal issues, it includes imagined dialogue, reconstructed scenes, and character interpretations meant to highlight broader themes of justice, dignity, and resilience. Any resemblance to actual events or individuals beyond public knowledge is purely coincidental. We do not intend to defame, mislead, or harm, but to invite reflection and meaningful conversation. Thank you for watching Alexandria Rising Stories.